Good evening. Tonight, we're going to spend some time with a dog who became famous not for doing something extraordinary, but for doing something so ordinary that most days people barely noticed. He waited. Before we begin, if you genuinely enjoy these quiet history stories, a like or subscribe helps the channel keep going, but only if it feels right. And if you'd like, leave a comment about where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. It's always nice to know this little corner of the internet reaches people settling in for the night in different places around the world. Now then, dim the lights if you can. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let your shoulders drop a little. We're going to ease into tonight's journey, and there's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just let the story move past you, like trains on a platform. Picture yourself on a quiet street corner in Tokyo on a cool evening. Not the Tokyo of towering screens and endless neon, but an older, softer version. The kind where wooden houses still outnumber concrete buildings, where most people travel on foot or bicycle, where the rhythm of the city feels closer to human scale. You're standing near Shibuya Station as the sun sets, watching commuters stream home. And there, near the station entrance, sitting with the kind of patience that suggests he's been there for hours, is an Akita. Thick coat, curled tail, dark eyes fixed on the doors where passengers emerge. His name is Hachiko, though if you were passing by in that moment, you might not know that yet. You might just think, there's a dog waiting for someone. And you'd be right. That's exactly what he's doing. The thing is, he's been doing it for years, long after the someone he's waiting for stopped coming home. Let's be clear about something before we drift back into his story. Hachiko wasn't magical. He wasn't unusually intelligent or trained to perform this vigil. He was simply a dog doing what dogs do, following a pattern that made sense to him, anchored to a person who had become the center of his small world. The loyalty people talk about wasn't a choice in the way humans understand choices. It was something deeper and simpler, a habit worn into the shape of devotion through sheer repetition. But to understand how a dog comes to spend nearly a decade waiting at a train station, we need to go back to before the waiting began, back to when the pattern was still whole, back to mornings when the walk to the station ended in reunion, not absence. Tokyo in the 1920s wakes up slowly but steadily. Someone slides a door open and cool air slips into a warm room. A kettle whistles softly. Voices murmur over breakfast. Rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables. Chopsticks click against bowls. Outside, the streets begin to fill. Workers in plain clothes walk with steady purpose. Lunchboxes tucked under arms. Children with satchels shuffle along, sometimes hurrying, sometimes dawdling, to examine a shop window or watch a cat washing its paws by a doorway. Bicycle bells ring. Newspaper sellers call out headlines in voices that rise and fall with practiced rhythm. The buildings here are not towers of glass and steel. Think less modern metropolis, more dense village that happened to grow very large. Wooden houses with tiled roofs, 2 stories at most. Narrow streets running between them like small rivers of stone. Behind sliding doors, tatami mats cover floors. Low tables hold teacups and books. The rustle of daily life is softer here, more intimate. You can hear your neighbor's radio through thin walls. You can smell what they're cooking for dinner. In one of these modest houses lives a university professor. Not young, not old. A man of routine. Lectures, research, writing, walking, eating, sleeping. The kind of person whose days follow one another in a pattern as steady as a metronome. And into this orderly life, at some point before our story truly begins, a small disruption arrived. A puppy. An Akita puppy, to be specific. Akitas are not tiny lapdogs, even as puppies. Hachiko would have been a mixture of softness and sturdiness from the start. Paws a little too big for his body, ears still deciding whether to stand fully upright, fur thick enough to hint at the substantial coat that would come later. For the professor, this wasn't just a pet. This was someone to share the quiet moments at home, someone to greet him at the door, someone to turn an empty room into a place that always held another living presence. Hachiko learned the shape of the house the way dogs do, nose first, then paws. The kitchen, where interesting smells gathered. The sitting room, where people talked and read. The bedroom, where night brought stillness and soft breathing. He learned the sounds too. The professor's footsteps, different from any visitors. The creak of certain floorboards. The way the front door slid open. The faint scratch of pen on paper when the house was otherwise still. In time, routines settled around both of them. The professor rose at the same hour most mornings, water running, clothing rustling, dishes clinking softly. Hachiko would wake with him, stretching in that long, luxurious way dogs do, front legs extended, chest low, back curved, tail giving a small, contented wave. Perhaps there was a shared moment before the day began properly, a hand resting briefly on a furry head, a few words spoken in a low, affectionate voice. Dogs don't understand every word, but they understand tone, rhythm, intention. During the day, while the professor was at the university, Hachiko learned what it meant to wait at home. The house would feel different, quieter, more spacious, as if the air itself were holding its breath. Sounds from the street became more noticeable. Wheels on the road, fabric whispering as people walked past, distant vendors calling out, a child laughing somewhere. Every sound at the door became a possibility. Is it him? No, someone else. Is it him now? Not yet. Sometimes there would be other people in the house. Family members, housekeepers, visitors. Hachiko would move among them politely enough. But the center of his small universe was the man whose scent was on the pillow, on the chair, on the papers spread across a low table. When the front door finally opened in the evening, and those familiar footsteps crossed the threshold, Hachiko's whole body would answer. Tail lifted, ears alert, paws quick. The waiting was over. The pattern was complete. The person had returned. For a dog, this simple cycle, departure, waiting, return, carries enormous meaning. It is how they learn that their world is stable, that when someone goes, they come back, that a day has a shape, and that shape includes reunion. In time, Hachiko began to follow the professor, not just to the door, but down the street, all the way to the station. The circle became a little larger. The path became familiar. The habit deepened, one quiet morning at a time. Picture one of those mornings in clear, slow motion. The professor finishes his breakfast. He checks the time, smooths his jacket, picks up his briefcase. There is a moment at the threshold where house and street meet. Shoes on. Perhaps an umbrella taken or left behind depending on the sky. Hachiko is there, of course. He has already read the signs of departure. The way the professor's movements change, the particular sounds of keys and papers. He moves with him as naturally as a shadow. The door opens and they step out together into the street. The air might be cool and crisp, carrying the faint smell of coal smoke or damp earth. Or perhaps it's humid, with a hint of rain to come later. The city is waking up fully now. Shop shutters sliding open. Voices rising from doorways. pots and pans clinking somewhere behind thin walls. Hachiko walks beside the professor, sometimes close enough that their legs almost brush, sometimes trotting a little ahead and then glancing back, making sure he's still following. The professor doesn't need to look down constantly to know the dog is there. He can feel that presence, the slight pull of the load or the soft sound of claws on the ground near his own steps. As they approach the station, the sounds gather and thicken. The distant murmur of a crowd, announcements drifting over the platforms in a calm, impersonal voice, the echoing calls of vendors selling newspapers or snacks to commuters who didn't quite have time to eat properly at home. A train arrives with its layered noises, a low, growing rumble, the metallic clatter of wheels over joins in the rails, the hiss and sigh as it slows, the squeal of brakes. People move toward it like iron filings drawn to a magnet. In all this movement, Hachiko and the professor find their small ritual. They stop at a certain spot, perhaps near the entrance, perhaps at the edge of the square. The professor bends just a little to rest a hand on Hachiko's head. There may be a gentle word or two, nothing dramatic, just ordinary syllables shaped by affection and habit. Then the professor straightens, joins the flow of people heading for the platform, and disappears through the doors of the station. Hachiko watches him go, ears tilted forward, eyes following until he vanishes from sight. And then Hachiko turns and walks home, because that's the pattern. The reunion will happen later, when the afternoon light has shifted and the evening commuters begin their return. This is how it goes, day after day. Leave together, part at the station. Hachiko returns home for the middle hours. Then, at the right time, a time he knows not from clocks, but from the length of shadows, the temperature of the air, the rhythm his body has learned. He makes the walk back to the station alone. He doesn't know the exact schedule, not in the way humans read timetables. He knows it through his body, through patterns of light and sound and smell. The way the air warms as the sun climbs higher, then begins to cool again. The rising and falling density of people around the station, his internal sense of when the professor's train should arrive. Sometimes he lies down near the entrance, paws tucked under his chest, tail curled close, watching. Sometimes he stands, shifting his weight occasionally, ears pricking at footsteps that sound familiar for a moment, and then prove to belong to someone else. This waiting is not anxious, not yet. It is simply what you do when the one who left always returns. Eventually, at the right time, there is a familiar shape in the crowd. The professor emerges from the station, walking through the stream of passengers. Perhaps he's a little tired or preoccupied with his work, but when he sees Hachiko, something in him softens. The hand comes down to greet the dog. The two fall into step once more, turning away from the station and back toward the quieter street that leads home. Day after day, this pattern continues. Morning departure, evening reunion. A small ritual, almost invisible in the noise of a busy city. But for one man and one dog, it is the central thread that stitches their days together. The professor gets to begin and end each workday with this quiet moment of connection. Hachiko gets the reassurance that his world is predictable, that departures lead to returns, that waiting is always rewarded. In modern terms, you might call this bonding, or you might say the dog was reinforcing a behavior through positive association. But those phrases don't quite capture the lived texture of it, the feel of a hand on your head before the goodbye, the particular rhythm of footsteps you'd recognize anywhere. the small surge of relief and happiness when the familiar figure appears exactly when and where you expect them to. For Hachiko, this is what it means to be a dog with a person. Not complicated, not philosophical. Just a daily pattern that makes sense all the way down to his bones. And then, on one particular day that begins like all the others, the pattern breaks. The morning looks the same. The professor wakes at the usual time. The sounds of washing, dressing, eating. The familiar steps toward the door. The quiet excitement in Hachiko's body, tail moving, eyes bright, muscles ready for the walk. They leave the house together. They walk the same street, follow the same path toward Shibuya Station. The city around them is in its usual motion, not aware that this day will be different from any other. At the station, the ritual plays out once more. They pause at their usual spot. The professor's hand rests on Hachiko's head for a brief moment. A few words. Goodbye for now. Then he turns and walks toward the platform entrance, swallowed by the crowd. Hachiko watches him go. The train arrives. Time moves on. Hachiko turns for home. The difference for Hachiko is not in the morning. The difference is in the evening that does not arrive in the way it always has. Somewhere else in the city, in a place of bright lights and worried voices, the professor collapses. There are doctors, nurses, hurried footsteps, hospital corridors. It is a human world of concern and effort, of medical terms and desperate attempts to help. It moves on a different track from the one Hachiko knows. The professor's heart has failed him suddenly, and by the time help arrives, it is already too late. For the dog waiting near the station, none of this is visible. He only knows that the time that usually brings the professor back begins to approach. The light changes in that familiar way. The patterns of commuters thicken and then thin. Trains arrive and depart with their usual rhythm. People hurry past with tired faces and loosened collars. Hachiko watches each wave of passengers with the same focused hope. He checks the scent on the air when doors open. He studies the silhouettes moving toward him. He listens for the particular rhythm of footsteps that belongs to his person. They do not come. Perhaps he stays longer than usual that evening, then longer still. The sky darkens. The crowds thin to a trickle. Station workers begin closing up for the night. Eventually, someone may coax him to leave, or the pull of hunger and fatigue may lead him back along the familiar path toward home, where the absence of the professor will quietly echo in every room. The next day, though, and the next after that, the pattern calls him back. Whatever explanations the humans exchange, words like suddenly or passed away, spoken softly over shared cups of tea, do not reach Hachiko in a way he can truly understand. Dogs do not grasp permanence the way we do. They understand presence and absence, departure and return. For him, there has been no completed reunion, no clear sign that the pattern has ended, just an interruption, however long, in the cycle he knows. So he walks again to the station. He waits again at their spot. Train after train comes and goes. Face after face passes by. He does not count days. He does not mark a calendar. He simply continues to show up where his world has always been repaired. At the station entrance, in the space between departure and return. At first, people passing through the station might not notice. Just a dog waiting. Dogs wait for people all the time. But as days turn into weeks and weeks into months, a few regular commuters begin to recognize him. That's the same dog who was here yesterday, and the day before, and every day this week, now that I think about it, always in the same spot. always watching the entrance with the same steady attention. Some of these commuters may have seen him before, back when the professor was still alive, back when the wait always ended in reunion. They begin to piece together what must have happened. The dog's person is not coming back, but the dog does not know this or cannot accept it, or perhaps simply cannot stop doing what has become the central organizing principle of his day. Word spreads in the quiet way these things do. Someone mentions it to a friend. A station worker tells the story to a passenger. A newspaper writer looking for a human interest piece hears about the faithful dog at Shibuya and comes to see for himself. An article appears, then another. People begin visiting the station specifically to see Hachiko, to witness this small, stubborn act of devotion. And through all of this, Hachiko simply continues. The attention means little to him. He is not waiting to be noticed. He is waiting for a specific person to come through those doors, and every other person, no matter how kind, is not the one he is looking for. Time begins to move differently around him now. Not the quick, purposeful time of commuters rushing to catch trains, but a slower, circular time. The time of seasons changing. The time of rituals repeated until they wear grooves into the world. Spring comes. The air softens. Trees along the streets put out buds, then leaves. Cherry blossoms drift down like pale pink snow, gathering in little piles along gutters and on the edges of steps. People's coats grow lighter. The station square smells faintly greener, as if the city itself is breathing a little easier. Hachiko is there, watching students with books under their arms, office workers with jackets slung over their shoulders, children with satchels bouncing against their backs. Some of them notice him and smile. A few begin to leave food, scraps from lunches, special treats bought along the way. Summer arrives and the air grows heavy and warm. The sun presses down on pavements and rooftops. Heat shimmers above the tracks as trains glide in and out. People move more slowly, handkerchiefs dabbing at foreheads, fans fluttering in hands. Hachiko adjusts. He chooses shadier spots when he waits. He pants a little more, tongue lolling, ears flicking at the buzz of insects. Still, he watches the station entrance, eyes tracking every figure that could, for half a second, be the one he is waiting for. Autumn comes and the light changes again. Shadows lengthen. The air holds a hint of coolness, especially in the mornings and evenings. Leaves turn and fall, skittering across the square in small gusts of wind. People pull their jackets closed and quicken their steps as daylight shrinks. Hachiko's coat thickens in response to the shifting temperatures. He seems, in some ways, even more at home now, built as he is for cooler air. His fur catches the low golden light of late afternoon, making him look, for a moment, as if he is made of the same soft colors as the leaves around him. Winter settles in. The cold arrives fully. Breath becomes visible in the air, a brief ghostly cloud with every exhale. The metal rails of the tracks gleam sharply. Frost traces delicate patterns on surfaces long before dawn. Snow may fall, muting the city's edges, turning familiar shapes into softer, whiter versions of themselves. Hachiko curls his tail closer to his body. He tucks his paws under him when he sits to conserve warmth. Sometimes snow gathers lightly on his back and head until he gives a short, dismissive shake, sending small flurries outward. And then spring comes again, and summer, and autumn, and winter. The cycle repeats. 1 year becomes 2, 2 becomes 3. The city around Hachiko changes in small ways. New shops open, old ones close. Fashions shift slightly. Children grow taller. But the station remains, and the trains keep running, and Hachiko keeps returning to his spot. By this point, he is no longer just a dog at a station. He is the dog at the station. People who pass through Shibuya every day begin to know him as a kind of constant. A student might notice him while hurrying to school, then see him again years later as they hurry to work, his presence quietly bridging the gap between those two chapters of their life. Hachiko becomes a landmark in his own right, as reliable as the station clock, as familiar as the platform announcements. Station workers look out for him. A few take particular care, stepping into the small gap between rules and compassion to make sure he is not driven away. Someone sets out water on hot days. Someone else makes sure he has shelter when the weather turns harsh. The community that moves through the station each day begins to collectively adopt him, not as a pet exactly, but as a shared responsibility, a living reminder of something they cannot quite articulate, but feel nonetheless. Let's be clear about what is happening here, because it would be easy to project too much onto Hachiko's inner life. He is not making a philosophical statement about loyalty. He is not trying to teach humans a lesson. He is not aware that he is becoming famous. He is simply a dog whose routine was disrupted in a way he cannot fully process, and so he keeps trying to complete the pattern. The waiting is what makes sense to him. It is the only response his mind and heart can formulate to an absence that has no explanation he can understand. Here's what that actually means in practical terms. Dogs are creatures of habit and association. When a pattern has been repeated hundreds or thousands of times, morning walk, goodbye at the station, evening reunion, it becomes deeply embedded. The neural pathways are worn smooth. The behavior becomes almost automatic. When the reunion stops happening, the dog does not necessarily conclude that it will never happen again. He may simply keep performing his part of the pattern, waiting for the world to remember its part. There is also comfort in the routine itself. In a world that has suddenly become confusing and empty, the walk to the station is at least familiar. The spot where he waits is a place where he once felt the happiness of reunion. Returning there may be the closest he can get to that feeling now. In modern terms, we might recognize this as a coping mechanism, a way of managing grief that looks like hope, because dogs do not have the language or concept for mourning the way humans do. But none of this makes the waiting less real or less moving. If anything, understanding that Hachiko is not operating from some transcendent wisdom, but from the simpler, deeper currents of love and habit, makes his vigil more poignant, not less. He is doing the only thing he knows how to do, and he is doing it with a constancy that most humans, for all our capacity for abstract thought, would struggle to match. The years continue to pass. 3 years becomes 5. 5 becomes 7. Hachiko's muzzle begins to show grey. His movements grow a little stiffer, especially on cold mornings. Rest becomes more frequent, but the pattern holds. He still makes the walk. He still takes up his post. He still watches the doors. People who visit the station now come with the specific intention of seeing him. They bring cameras. They take photographs. Some reach out to touch him gently, as if contact with this living symbol might transfer some of his steadfastness to their own lives. Hachiko tolerates this attention with the same patient neutrality he brings to everything that is not the return of his person. He is polite but uninterested. None of these strangers, however kind, are who he is waiting for. Stories about him appear in newspapers and magazines. Writers try to capture what makes this simple act so compelling. Some focus on the loyalty angle, comparing Hachiko to legendary faithful servants and devoted companions throughout history. Others take a more sentimental approach, imagining conversations between the dog and his lost friend, adding dialogue and emotion that may make for better storytelling, but drift away from the quiet truth of what is actually happening. Think less dramatic tale of supernatural devotion, more ordinary grief playing out in the only way available to a creature without words. Hachiko's story is powerful precisely because it is so simple and so limited. He cannot write letters or visit a grave or talk through his feelings with friends. He can only return to the place where his world used to make sense and wait for it to make sense again. By the 9th year of his vigil, Hachiko has become a fixture of Tokyo life. Children who were toddlers when he started waiting are now old enough to visit the station on their own, and they know his story the way they know fairy tales and folk legends. Adults incorporate him into their daily routines, checking to see if he is in his usual spot, feeling a small pang of concern on the rare days when he is not. The city itself has continued to change around him. More cars on the streets now. Fashion has shifted. Skirts are a different length. Hats are different shapes. Technology creeps forward in small increments. But Hachiko remains constant, a still point in the turning world, aging slowly but visibly, his body showing the wear of time and weather, and the sheer accumulated weight of all that waiting. On cold nights, people worry about him. On hot days, they make sure he has water and shade. He has become, in a sense, everyone's dog, even though he belongs to no one now, or perhaps still belongs to the memory of the professor, which amounts to the same thing. The community takes care of him not out of pity, but out of something closer to respect. He is doing something they recognize as difficult and important, even if they could not quite explain why it matters. Let's be clear about something else. Akitas, as a breed, were developed in the mountains of northern Japan. Think less city pet, more working dog, bred for harsh climates and serious tasks. They hunted bear and boar. They guarded homes and families. They were built for endurance, for cold weather, for independence and loyalty to their people. Hachiko's ability to maintain this routine for years, through all kinds of weather, is partly temperament and partly genetics. An Akita's thick double coat handles winter well. Their calm, steady temperament allows them to wait without constant entertainment. Their loyalty, once given, tends to be deep and unwavering. In modern terms, if you brought an Akita into your home today, you would see echoes of what made Hachiko who he was. They tend to bond intensely with their families. They can be reserved with strangers. They need purpose and routine. They are not dogs who adapt easily to chaos or constant change. They pick their people and commit fully, which is wonderful until it is heartbreaking, as in Hachiko's case. But this also means Hachiko was not suffering, in the way humans might imagine suffering in his position. The waiting was not torture for him. It was simply what he did. It gave structure to his days. It kept him connected in his own mind to the person he loved. And the attention from the community, while not what he sought, at least ensured he was fed and safe, and not entirely alone in the world. As the 9th year moves toward the 10th, Hachiko's age begins to show more clearly. His steps are slower. His body is thinner. He sleeps more. The station workers who have watched over him all these years can see that he is nearing the end of his own journey, though no one speaks of it directly. They simply make sure he is comfortable. They give him the softer spots to rest. They are gentle with him on the days when standing seems to require more effort than it once did. And still, when the time comes, he makes his way to the station. The pattern calls him, even when his body suggests it might be easier to stay where he is and rest. He moves more carefully now, taking his time, but he goes. He finds his spot. He settles himself down with the deliberate precision of an old dog, arranging stiff joints into the least uncomfortable position, and he watches the entrance. By now, nearly 10 years have passed since the professor walked through those doors for the last time. 10 years of seasons cycling past. 10 years of trains arriving and departing. 10 years of watching faces that are never quite the right face. If Hachiko understands, on some level, that the reunion he waits for will not come, he gives no sign of it. Or perhaps understanding and hoping are not mutually exclusive for him. Perhaps he can know, in the dim way available to him, that his person is gone, and still feel compelled to keep watch just in case. There is something quietly devastating about this, but also something comforting. The waiting, after all this time, has become its own form of connection. As long as Hachiko returns to this spot, the professor is not entirely absent. The pattern they built together still exists, even if only one half of it can still be performed. Memory, for a dog, is not about words or images stored in the mind. It is about places and smells and routines. And in that sense, Hachiko's vigil is a kind of living memory, a way of keeping the professor present in the only way he knows how. The people of Tokyo, watching this unfold year after year, begin to understand that they are witnessing something rare. Not a miracle, exactly, but something equally precious. A small, ordinary act of love that refuses to end simply because the world says it should. In a city that is modernizing rapidly, where old ways are giving way to new ones, where tradition and progress are in constant negotiation, Hachiko represents something that does not change, does not compromise, does not move on. And so, while Hachiko is still alive, still making his daily journey to the station, plans begin to form. A group of admirers and supporters decide that this story, this dog, this quiet act of faithfulness, deserves to be remembered. They commission a sculptor. Measurements are taken, sketches are made. The goal is to capture Hachiko not in some dramatic pose, but exactly as people see him every day, sitting calmly, ears alert, gaze steady, waiting. The statue is completed and installed near the station in 1934, while Hachiko is still alive. Imagine the scene, if you can. A bronze Akita, slightly larger than life, sits on a pedestal near the entrance to Shibuya Station. It is not a monument to a dead hero, but a tribute to a living one. And nearby, the real Hachiko continues his watch, perhaps unaware of or uninterested in this metal replica of himself. There is a small ceremony for the unveiling. Speeches are made. Hachiko himself is present, brought to stand near his own statue. Photographs capture this strange, touching moment. The old dog and his bronze double, one warm and breathing and mortal, the other cold and permanent and meant to outlast time. People gather. Children stare. Someone may reach out to touch first the statue, then the real dog, comparing the feel of bronze and fur. For Hachiko, this probably means very little. It is simply another day, with more people than usual, more attention than usual, but still not the attention he seeks. When the ceremony ends, he likely returns to his routine as if nothing has changed. Because for him, nothing has. The bronze dog will wait in that spot forever, unmoving. Hachiko will wait as long as his body allows, and then he will wait no more. That time comes, finally, in March of 1935. Hachiko is found lying on a street not far from the station. He is 10 or 11 years old, which is a reasonable age for an Akita, especially one who has spent nearly a decade living rough, exposed to all weathers, sustained by the kindness of strangers and his own stubborn routine. His body has simply reached the end of what it can do. The news spreads quickly through Tokyo. The faithful dog has died. The vigil is over. People who passed him every day without quite realizing how much his presence meant feel a surprising depth of loss. It is as if a small but essential part of the city's character has gone quiet. The station feels emptier without him. The bronze statue, which was charming when it stood alongside the real dog, now feels almost unbearably sad. Hachiko is mourned publicly. Articles are written. Tributes are paid. His body is preserved by a taxidermist and eventually placed in a museum, which is both an honor and slightly strange. This attempt to keep him present, even in death. But perhaps it makes sense in its own way. He spent so much of his life trying to maintain a presence, trying to hold a connection across absence. Now others are doing the same for him. The bronze statue remains at the station, of course, and over time, something unexpected happens. It becomes more than just a memorial to one dog. It becomes a meeting place, a landmark, a symbol. Let's meet at Hachiko, people say, arranging to find each other in the flow of the city. Couples on first dates, friends reconnecting after years apart, families gathering before heading off together. There is something poetic about this. The dog who waited for someone who never came has become the place where people wait for each other, where separations end and togetherness begins. The statue that was meant to honor his loyalty has become an anchor for thousands of other small reunions. Every day, people stand near that bronze Akita, checking their phones, scanning the crowd, waiting for a familiar face to appear. And when that face does appear, when the person they are waiting for finally arrives, they experience a tiny echo of the reunion Hachiko spent years hoping for. The story spreads beyond Tokyo, beyond Japan. Books are written, each adding their own interpretation. Films are made, some more faithful to the quiet truth than others. The tale is translated into dozens of languages. People in distant countries who have never been to Shibuya Station and never will still know the name Hachiko and the broad strokes of his story. Some versions lean heavily into sentimentality, adding dialogue or imagined thoughts, turning the simple act of waiting into something more dramatic than it was. Others try to extract moral lessons, using Hachiko as a symbol for whatever virtue they want to champion. But underneath all the retellings, the core remains simple and true. There was a dog. He loved someone. He waited for that someone long after the world considered the waiting pointless. And people, recognizing something essential in that small act, have chosen to remember. Let's be clear about what makes this story endure. It is not because Hachiko was special in the sense of being extraordinary. Akitas are loyal by nature. Many dogs form intense bonds with their people. Many dogs grieve when those people die. What makes Hachiko's story resonate is the visibility of it. He did not grieve in private, hidden away in a house. He grieved in public, in one of the busiest train stations in one of the largest cities in the world. His waiting was witnessed, day after day, by thousands of people who could not help but see themselves in it. Because waiting is something all humans understand. We wait for people we love to come home. We wait for news. We wait for circumstances to change. We wait for things to get better, to make sense, to return to the way they were. And sometimes what we wait for never comes, but we keep waiting anyway because we do not know what else to do. Hachiko, in his simple animal way, was performing the very human act of hoping against hope, of maintaining faith in a pattern even when all evidence suggests the pattern is broken. In modern terms, we might say he gave people permission to feel their own grief more fully. Or we might say he reminded them that loyalty and love do not require complex reasoning, that the simplest gestures can carry the deepest meaning. Or we might say he was just a dog doing what dogs do, and it is we who choose to see something larger in it, because we need stories that tell us faithfulness is possible, that love can be stubborn enough to outlast loss. All of these interpretations can be true at once. The story is simple enough to hold them all. If you were to visit Shibuya Station today, nearly a century after Hachiko's death, you would still find the statue. It has been rebuilt once after the original bronze was melted down during wartime shortages, but it stands in roughly the same spot, and it serves the same purpose. People gather there constantly. Tourists take photos with it. Locals use it as a landmark. The square around it is busier than anything Hachiko would have known, full of screens and lights and noise. But the statue sits calmly in the center of it all, a small island of stillness. If you stand there for a while, watching people interact with the statue, you will see all kinds of things. Children climbing onto its back while parents take pictures. Teenagers meeting up, calling out to each other across the square. Business people checking their watches, waiting for colleagues. Couples greeting each other with hugs or kisses. Their reunions playing out in the shadow of the dog, who waited for a reunion that never came. And if you are there at the right time, you might see something even more touching. Someone standing alone near the statue, hand resting on the bronze head, lost in thought. Maybe they are thinking of Hachiko. Maybe they are thinking of someone they have lost. Maybe they are simply taking a quiet moment in a loud city, using this statue the way people use churches or parks, as a place to pause, to remember, to feel connected to something larger than the immediate rush of life. The story asks very little of us. It does not demand that we change our lives or make grand gestures. It simply offers a quiet example of what love can look like when stripped down to its most basic form. Show up. Be present. Keep faith with the people and patterns that matter to you, even when it is hard, even when the world has moved on. Hachiko never knew he was teaching anyone anything. He was just trying to make sense of his world in the only way available to him. But in doing so, he gave people a story they could hold on to, a story that says the small things we do, the routines we keep, the people we wait for, the love we maintain even in absence. These things matter. They are worth remembering. They are worth honoring. As you sit here now, listening to this story in the dark or the dim light of evening, you might notice your own breathing has slowed. Your body has settled a little deeper into whatever is holding you. The story has carried you from a busy train station nearly 100 years ago to this quiet moment right now. And somewhere in that journey, perhaps some of the day's tension has eased away. You do not need to hold on to every detail. You do not need to remember dates or names, or even the exact sequence of events. What matters, if anything matters at all, is the feeling underneath the facts. The sense of what it means to be loyal to someone, to something, even when the world says it is time to let go. The recognition that grief and love are often the same thing, just pointed in different directions. Hachiko's waiting is over. It has been over for a long time. But the story of that waiting continues, passed from person to person, generation to generation, language to language. It has become one of those rare stories that feels both specific and universal, rooted in a particular place and time, but somehow belonging to everyone who hears it. If you find yourself at Shibuya Station someday, you might pause at the statue for a moment. You might reach out and touch the smooth bronze, warm from the sun or cool from the night air. You might think of the real dog who sat in that spot for so many years, watching and waiting. You might feel a small ache in your chest, that particular mixture of sadness and sweetness that comes from stories about love that persists, even when reason says it should not. Or you might simply use the statue as a landmark, the way thousands of people do every day, and never think much about the dog because it represents. And that would be fine too. Hachiko's story does not need everyone to know it or care about it. It exists whether we pay attention or not, like all the other small, faithful acts that happen in the world without fanfare or recognition. The night is quiet now. The story has run its course. Somewhere in Tokyo, the bronze Akita sits in his eternal vigil, surrounded by light and noise, and the endless flow of people. But here, in this moment, in the space you are occupying right now, there is only stillness. Your eyes may be heavy. Your thoughts may be drifting. The details of the story may already be blurring at the edges, which is exactly as it should be. Let yourself settle a little more. Let your jaw relax so your teeth are not quite touching. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the weight of your body, held and supported. You have followed Hachiko's story from the beginning of his vigil to the end, and now you can let it go, the way you let go of everything when sleep begins to arrive. The dog has finished his waiting. You have reached the end of this quiet evening, and whatever comes next, whether it is sleep or rest, or simply a soft drifting in the space between waking and dreaming, you can allow it to come in its own time, without effort, without struggle. The station is far away now. The statue stands alone. The story rests, and you, listening here in the dark, can rest too.